Rain lashed against the windows, each drop a tiny hammer against the fragile glass. The storm outside was relentless, as if the heavens themselves were warning them of the night ahead. Thunder rattled the old Victorian house, its ancient timbers groaning in protest. The lightning illuminated the house in brief, eerie flashes, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Inside, four friends huddled around a flickering candle, their faces bathed in its weak, trembling light. The room was filled with an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the candle's flame. The air was thick with anticipation and fear, each friend lost in their own thoughts. They had all heard the stories about Cranbrook Manor, tales of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena. This was no ordinary night. This was the night they dared to spend in Cranbrook Manor, a place shrouded in mystery and fear. The manor loomed over them, its dark windows like empty eyes staring into their souls. It was a place that seemed to breathe, to watch, to wait.
Are you sure about this? Emily's voice trembled, betraying her fear. She glanced around the room, her eyes wide with apprehension.
Don't be such a scaredy cat, Em. Tom's voice was light, teasing, but there was an edge to it, a hint of his own unease.
Tom scoffed, trying to mask his own nervousness. He adjusted his baseball cap, a nervous tic he had developed over the years. He adjusted his baseball cap, a nervous tic he had. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about his state of mind.
It's just an old house. Tom's voice was firm, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes.
Yeah, besides, think of the story we'll tell if we actually last the whole night. Jake's voice was filled with excitement, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the challenge.
Jake pulled out his phone, the screen casting a blue glow on his face. He was always the one to document their adventures, to capture every moment.
We're live streaming this, by the way. Jake's voice was casual, but there was a spark of mischief in his eyes. Let's give the people what they want. He grinned, holding up the phone to capture their faces.
The fourth member of the group, Sarah, remained silent. She was the quiet one, the observer, always taking in more than she let on. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the dusty furniture, the cobwebs clinging to every corner. The manor was a relic of the past, a place where time seemed to stand still. She could feel a weight settle in her stomach, a sense of dread that she couldn't shake. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. This was a bad idea, she just knew it. But it was too late to back out now. They were committed, and the night was just beginning. The drive to Cranbrook Manor was a blur of wind-whipped trees and driving rain. The road twisted and turned, each bend revealing more of the dense, foreboding forest. The rain pounded relentlessly on the car's roof, creating a cacophony that drowned out any attempt at conversation. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, barely providing a clear view of the path ahead. The headlights pierced through the darkness, but the shadows seemed to close in around them, as if the night itself was alive and watching. Each flash of lightning illuminated the old house perched atop the hill, like a watchful gargoyle. The brief moments of light revealed the mansion's decaying facade, its windows dark and empty, like soulless eyes staring down at them. The house seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, each lightning strike making it appear more sinister and foreboding. It seemed to loom larger with every turn of the wheels, a monstrous shadow against the stormy sky. The closer they got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air was thick with tension, and an unspoken dread settled over the group. The mansion's silhouette was a dark blot against the horizon, growing ever more imposing as they approached.
Creepy, even for me. Jake's voice was barely audible over the storm, but the unease in his tone was unmistakable. He was usually the first to laugh off any hint of fear, but tonight was different. The house had a way of getting under your skin, making even the bravest feel small and vulnerable.
Jake muttered, his usual bravado fading. He glanced around nervously, his eyes darting from the house to the surrounding trees, as if expecting something to leap out at them from the shadows. The storm seemed to amplify every sound, the rustling leaves and creaking branches creating an eerie symphony that set their nerves on edge. As they pulled up to the rusted iron gates, the storm seemed to intensify, as if echoing their growing unease. The gates were old and weathered, their iron bars twisted and covered in rust. They creaked ominously as the wind pushed against them. adding to the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. The path beyond the gates was overgrown and barely visible, leading up to the mansion that loomed ever larger in the distance. Wind howled through the trees like a banshee's wail. The branches swayed and groaned, their skeletal forms casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. The storm seemed to have a life of its own, its fury growing with each passing moment. The howling wind carried with it whispers of forgotten secrets and lost souls, adding to the eerie atmosphere that surrounded them. The house stood before them, a decaying testament to forgotten tragedies. Its walls were cracked and crumbling, the paint peeling away to reveal the bare wood beneath. The windows were shattered, their jagged edges glinting in the lightning flashes. The front door hung askew, barely attached to its hinges, as if inviting them to enter and uncover the horrors within.
Ready? Tom's voice wavered, betraying his attempt at confidence. He looked at each of his friends in turn, searching for any sign of reassurance, but all he found were faces etched with fear and uncertainty. The question hung in the air, unanswered, as they all stared at the house, each lost in their own thoughts.
Tom asked, trying to sound confident. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The house seemed to mock his bravado, its darkened windows and gaping doorways promising nothing but despair. He could feel the weight of the night's events pressing down on him, but he knew there was no turning back now. No one answered. They just stared at the house, each lost in their own thoughts. The silence was deafening, broken only by the relentless storm. Each of them grappled with their own fears and doubts, wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. The house loomed before them, a silent sentinel guarding its dark secrets. The weight in Sarah's stomach intensified. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a nightmare. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the thunder that rumbled overhead. She glanced at her friends, seeing her own fear reflected in their eyes. The house seemed to call to them, its dark presence drawing them in despite their better judgment. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever horrors awaited them inside. The front door creaked open with a groan as if disturbed after decades of silence. The air inside was heavy, thick with dust and the smell of decay. It clung to their throats, suffocating.
Does it smell weird to you guys?
They stepped inside, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The storm outside seemed distant now, muted by the thick walls and the weight of the house itself. They were trapped. Cobwebs brushed against their faces as they moved deeper into the house. Each room seemed to hold its breath, filled with the ghosts of forgotten lives. The silence was broken only by the creaking of the floorboards beneath their feet. The house seemed to press in on them as they explored, each room more unsettling than the last. A grandfather clock stood frozen in time, its hands pointing accusingly at the darkened hallway. A rocking chair swayed gently despite the stillness of the air.
Did you hear that?
Emily whispered, clutching Sarah's arm. A low moan seemed to echo from the depths of the house.
It's just the wind, Em, relax.
Mark laughed nervously, shining his flashlight down a hallway, but Sarah wasn't so sure. She could feel eyes on them, watching their every move from the shadows. The air grew colder, sending a shiver down her spine. The house was awake. They stumbled upon a library, its shelves stacked with dusty books and forgotten memories. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and the weight of countless untold stories. Each book seemed to whisper secrets of the past, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to listen. A heavy book lay open on a table, its pages yellowed with age. The cover was cracked and worn, hinting at the countless hands that had turned its pages over the years. It was as if the book itself was a relic, a testament to the passage of time and the endurance of knowledge. Curiosity outweighed their fear, and they gathered around it. Each person felt a strange connection to the book, as if it held the answers to questions they hadn't yet asked. The room seemed to grow colder, the air more still, as they leaned in closer, their breaths shallow with anticipation. The leather-bound journal belonged to a young woman named Amelia, the last resident of Cranbrook Manor. Her name was etched into the cover with a delicate hand, a stark contrast to the rough, aged leather. It was clear that this journal was more than just a collection of thoughts. It was a window into her soul. Her words, penned in elegant script, painted a picture of a happy life shattered by tragedy. Each entry was a glimpse into her world, filled with joy, love, and ultimately sorrow. The ink had faded in places, but the emotion behind the words was still palpable, resonating with the readers as if Amelia herself was speaking to them. Her husband, driven mad by grief, had taken his own life within these very walls. The manor, once a place of laughter and light, had become a prison of despair. The walls seemed to echo with the cries of the past, a haunting reminder of the love that had been lost.
He walks these halls still. The words were underlined as if to emphasize the lingering presence of his tormented spirit. It was a chilling thought, the idea that his soul was trapped, unable to find peace.
Amelia had written. Her entries were filled with a desperate hope that one day her words would reach someone who could understand her pain. She wrote of love, loss, and the unending sorrow that had consumed her life. His tormented soul, unable to find peace. The shadows in the hallway seemed to move as if the very air was alive with his anguish. It was a place where the past and present collided, where the living and the dead coexisted in a fragile balance. A sudden crash from upstairs made them jump. The sound echoed through the manor, a stark reminder of the unseen forces at play. Their hearts raced as they exchanged nervous glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. The journal slipped from Sarah's grasp, falling to the floor with a heavy thud. Dust rose from the impact, swirling in the dim light like spirits disturbed from their slumber. It was as if the manor itself was reacting to their presence, a silent warning to tread carefully. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a silence filled with the weight of history, of lives lived and lost within these walls. They stood frozen, the gravity of their discovery settling over them like a shroud. The echoes of tragedy were all around them, a haunting reminder of the past that refused to be forgotten.